Welcome everyone to VeggieTales, the Frightful House edition. We were hopefully trying to secure funding to, make it into an animated cartoon this episode, but we didn't quite get that far. But we do still have lots of vegetable stories, especially biblically themed ones for you today.
Yeah, of course. I mean, Key spent all of our money on gambling magic, so we can't actually produce the VeggieTales Frightful Howls anime.
No, unfortunately, most of the money that was left over after that was spent on the actual gambling part.
Listen, I think I've never seen an episode of VeggieTales as a kid, but as an adult, I have to say there's something about it. Like that one there's that scene where they crucified a zucchini. You know what I'm talking about?
How did they pull it off?
That's the part. That's the part that got me. Is I don't know how they did it. How did they get the horizontal axis on there?
I guess that
Oh
answers the
man.
question about the number of nails, at least.
Oh my God. I'd actually no, I seriously have never seen any of VeggieTales. And out of the three of us, I think I'm the one that does like the most Christian magic, as it were. Like consistently, I suppose, not necessarily opportunistically as a magician.
Mhm.
And there's some I always felt like it's my destiny to see it. And like we're all like weird pagan, Christo-pagan, adjacent plus other religions things, but like there's something I feel like a VeggieTales Frightful House watch is gonna eventually end up on our book club. Like just so that we can consult the occult virtues of the legumes.
Manifesting, right? The
Manifesting.
I
You
need
see,
that antidepressant chickpea hummus from the BGM.
Oh my God, yes, and the Picatrix too, right? The
Yeah,
antidepressant hummus. Yeah.
yeah, there it is.
There it is.
if the divine teachings aren't imparted by a cucumber, I don't really think they're divine.
Honestly, slay. Yo, what is that woman in the UK that does divination with asparagus?
The Queen.
Do you remember?
Yeah.
Okay. Oh no, I just Googled her, guys. I found it. The asparagus fortune teller, Jemima Packington, claims to be able to read the future using asparagus. Everything she needs to know can be seen in the shapes made by the spears when they're tossed on the surface. Also known as Mystic Veg, Packington, who lives in the UK city of Bath, says that she has successfully predicted a number of big events, including Brexit, Megxit, Boris Johnson's tenure as Prime Minister. Okay, she says the asparagus stalks makes patterns which are able to interpret. Can we get her on the podcast? I know our rule is it has to be a
Mhm.
personal friend, but I'm willing to be her personal friend. Like I wanna queen out with her because asparagomancy is real. I love that she divines with lots. Salt, you have to help us.
Mhm. Pound on her door, bring a bushel of asparagus, and be like, "We gotta talk."
We need you to help us get her on the podcast because Jemima, if you're listening, I'm ready to buy a reading.
Understood.
Have you guys seen that really freaky white German asparagus that grows like multiple inches in a day?
Yes.
We must harvest its occult virtue for this. I will elaborate at a later time, but
Spargelzeit.
Mm-mm. Be not alarmed at the frightful howls which you may hear. It's Svinga, Salt, and the bureaucratic processes of the heavenly court key.
Oh Lord. It's the angels ain't got free will episode. Let's go.
Nah, sorry. I'm just saying, right? Okay. Our boy Aquinas, he points out pretty clearly. Intellect denotes free will. Anyway, before the meltdown begins, let's that key finish.
Let's using the intellect to do a little housekeeping today. We love a smooth transition, as smooth as the spagel. So tying it all together, that's It's
That's what I call you.
Nasty.
Oh man. So remember to check us out at twitter.com/frightful howls and patreon.com/the frightful howls. We have a bonus episode every month curated by and for our patrons. We have a Discord server where we share the results of asparagomancy and recipes involving those very stalks. We have Salt's fantastic almanac. We also have a monthly live occult book club where we discuss a text of your choosing. We have show notes for every episode and more. Also, please remember, as you vote for these things, to head over to the different social medias and give us a like, rating, and review on Spotify, iTunes, or wherever you might be listening to us. It helps us fight the demiurge of the algorithm. Also, remember to check out our services while you're there. I offer personalized coaching in magic and mediumship, sorcery for hire, readings, and custom talismans, oils, tools, whatever you can need. I'm more than happy to sit down, divine with you, and we will figure something out to solve your problem. Svinga offers Balkan Favamancy readings. She is the best. Go book a reading with her.
Oh.
And Salt's books are closed, but keep an eye out for his monthly astrological almanac on the Patreon. It is worth its weight in gold.
Truly worth the price of admission alone.
That it is.
Right, you fellas, aren't you?
And you can also, if you are curious as to what the hell we are talking about with asparagomancy and all of these things, hit us up on social media. Svinga is at Dragon Cunning. Salt is at Salt CNC. That is CANDC. And I am at barnowl.key.
Oh my goodness gracious, we are talking angels.
I think this episode's been a bit overdue, but yeah, that's today's subject.
What made you want to do an angels episode? So
Honestly, I think it's one of the more interesting subjects because it's one that has so many different angles to come from, right? Like it's probably one of the subjects that has the most contrarian viewpoints amongst occultists, and I'm not really going to be diving too much into like the various arguments and perspectives on angels as beings. We're mostly going to be focusing kind of on a predominantly like European, especially like Latin, but also Greek understanding of the angelical. And, their presence in magical literature is so extensive. The sheer amount of oral traditions surrounding them, it'd be impossible to make an exhaustive list, right? And, even probably the most well known grimoire outside the first book of Lemegeton's the Heptameron as well, right? Like from Agrippa's fourth book. Obviously, its roots in the Lucidarium. We all know that features the seals, characters of the seven archangels associated with and set alongside the planets. And of course, as well, like we have the writings of Francis Barrett in the English speaking world, and his drawing spirits into crystals, which is almost definitely written by Barrett. And it's probably, one of the most typical manners in which we find practitioners today calling on angels, right? Like both of you have used this method quite extensively. My own exposure to it is somewhat limited. I've used it a few times, but really I was more of a John Dee guy back when I was younger and doing more extensive work here. But drawing spirits into crystals is so widely known, and I think it would be a good place to start the episode, right? If we could start by discussing that and your experiences with it all before we dive into the research elements of the episode.
yeah, this was how I got my taste of grimoire, like angelic magic, because otherwise, my background being so orthodox, like praying to angels like Saint Michael and Saint Gabriel and so on, was never an issue. And we have our own folk practices with them. So, like Archangel Michael Dushovadnik is Soul Taker. So, Archangel Michael the Soul Taker is a mask of the Master of the Wolves. He is an incredibly important saint across traditions in the Balkans, especially in Bulgaria and Serbia and so on. So, like, these are the absolutely practices that I was familiar with, but like full-on grimoire magic, like my first foray was definitely drawing spirits into crystals. And I had read Enochian stuff, but it wasn't something to this day I've never actually practiced anything Enochian. That is a thing that I want to do with you two boys at some point, in person. But I think that really with DSIC, it was the ease of access. It was at the time when like I was 18 and everyone was writing about this. Like every single like Rufus Opus had published his Seven Spheres. Everyone was coming out with courses on this stuff. Like I was just like, hold on, you're telling me I can do this? pretty easily. Like it's not going to take an arm and a leg to get it done because there was a version of this being promoted that was kind of like bare bones. Like just do it on cardboard if you have to. Like you don't have to get
Mhm.
an ebony wand, just get anything, And so my first attempt at it was very, very like low on like nowadays people when they read the blog and they listen to the podcast, they know I'm um a materia girl. I like to make things nice and proper because I can. But I also know that I can do a lot of this without depending on the kinds of spirits that I'm packed in with and who can do these things for me. But like at the time, very limited experience with anything grimoires. I had read Agrippa, I had read the Key of Solomon, I had read the Heptameron, a bunch of other things, but it worked. It actually fucking worked. And then after that, I started upgrading things. I got the crystal got better. I got an ebony wand. That my table improved into a wooden one from like the literal Bristol board I was using. And I went through the seven planetary angels several times, for various things. And I mean, bottom of the line, it worked.
Mhm.
And it was not the angels that the fate, when I called like Michael as the solar angel, it was not the Michael that I had prayed to before. It was similar, but not the same. And so that's when I realized that like a lot of these angels or beings they're like prisms, their light shines to different faces, and you meet those different faces depending on the capacity or the office that they're inhabiting when you call them.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And we're gonna get into that later in the episode, aren't we? When we cover
Hmm.
celebrities. Yes, I'm looking forward to that. The
Mhm.
Yeah, I love how you describe like the early experiences, right? Like I think especially all of us who started when we were younger have kind of been through that. Where like you don't necessarily have the resources that you do as an adult, so you're kind of making do with like whatever scraggly cardboard cutouts or like printouts or really bad wood engravings that you can kind of sort, and you're just doing whatever you can to find an alternative. And that's very much fallen out of style today, but when you're young you don't really have much of a choice, right?
Hmm.
And so I love
Mhm.
hearing that you guys experience the same thing. I know Key as well. You've kind of experimented with drawing spirits into crystals as well.
Yeah, I've definitely experimented with it extensively, just on the basis of it being really easy to get into and being effective with almost nothing. Like when I was just starting out, one of the magical experiences that I will never forget is I was living in a two-bedroom apartment with 8 other people at the time. We were all broke, just doing whatever the fuck and needed money. And so I got the laundry basket that we had, turned it upside down, got the fitted sheet off of one of the beds and used that as the altar cloth, used the normal sheet as like the robe, as it were. Printed out the table of practice from a PDF that I had pirated of the Magus. And then I went outside, I talked to the tree that was growing outside of the building and cut one of the branches off and used that as the wand. And then we used just like a rock that we had in the house as the crystal. And we're like, we need fucking money. and just doing that incantation over and over and over again until a pair of eyes showed up at the thing. And then, a bunch of us got jobs and had some windfalls of cash and we just made it fucking work. And that was one of the pivotal experiences in my magic career, as it were. Just because of, you know, in a place of kind of desperation, being like, magic actually fucking works and it's the tool that you can rely on when you have nothing else.
Mhm.
And yeah, just developing from there, getting a much nicer setup, much nicer tools, um, going through different spirits, especially working the Barrett material itself, where you have like the intelligence, the daimon, and the archangel, and going through each trinity of those for each planet for different things, and seeing how they interact, what makes them tick, and really falling in love with that grimoire as a system.
Mm. I mean, let that be a message, right? Like this man is out here using a overturned laundry basket as his altar. Like, don't. There's no excuses, folks.
It was really beautiful to see that it worked with so little, and it just got me excited to see what else I could make happen with very limited resources.
Mhm.
Mhm.
Yeah, exactly. Like it is, I think it's one of those examples of like the highest, or it's an example of something I find incredibly beautiful about certain grimoires. Drawing Space into Crystals, chief among them in this category, where it's like so simplified and so open sourced, and the spirits are just like so amenable to helping humanity. Like some of them can get nasty, but they will show up when you call them, and they will do what you say. It makes me very happy that people who are in situations such as that one can actually get themselves out of it by relying on these tools and just being available. Um,
Yeah.
yeah, I don't know. One of the things that I think we've really emphasized in this podcast is like magic is real. Everyone can do it, so go fucking do it. And this is one of the primary inroads that I took and that I now recommend.
Yeah, it's always so accessible, isn't it? Like ultimately, the tools, the equipment, it's crucial, it's great to have, but if someone can't do magic without them, I'm not entirely sure what they're developing, what they're building exactly. Um, if spirits don't listen when you speak, then what are all the tools for, right?
Absolutely. Well, I'm excited. Let's dive right in then. How about you? Like what were your you said it was a Nokian, right? How did that go for you?
Yeah, so like yourself, I was young when I started with this stuff. I think I was around 15. And I made my ring in my CDT workshop at school using brass sheet metal and tin snips, which is, nice tip for those who do need to cut metal and don't want to, invest in a saw or anything. Tin snips are,
Always tin slip is how I make the tin and lead charms in the PGM. It's how I have done pentacles, tin snips.
yeah, they're
Mhm.
amazing. And I just remember cutting it out. I cut out a little plate and I also cut out like a thin strip and bent it into a ring shape. I engraved it using this massively oversized Dremel. Like this was not meant for jewelry or like fine engravement. This is meant for proper shop work. Added the Pele character. It was atrocious, right? I made a nice table in the same CBT workshop actually. Printed out and painted on. I just remember my CDT teacher asking me what the fuck I was doing. I just thought, yeah, it's from this film. Like, I don't even remember the film. But he just shrugged, got on with his day, and I got home and gave it a go with my definitely not to instructions set up at the time, all ready for work. And for about 2 years, I want to say, that was a lot of my practice, working through some of these spirits within the D texts. And it was really interesting, actually. Some of those spirits are very alien, but I think that's true for angels in general. A lot of the time, I really don't agree with people who claim like, oh, the angels described in these journals aren't angels, or imprinting like strange functions that they're somehow different from your run-of-the-mill angelical intelligences. I don't really care for that perspective. I think they're angels like any other. They have their particular offices, and these offices that are common across the board. It's just listing and arranging them in a way that is more organized than your typical fair. A little bit, you know, the cryptography is a little bit resemblant to Trophemius in some ways, maybe. Probably as far as the spirits I work with most of the time, it was predominantly the heptarchal spirits. Benapsin probably was the most prominent, the planetary king of Saturn. Very cold, intimidating spirit. No room for nonsense. And obviously, when you're 15, 16, you're practicing, that's kind of half of what you're bringing to the table. So that was a very interesting period of my life. And Oikin in general is probably something I'd love to see talked about more in the public sphere beyond a lot of the more popular interpretations of it that have been floating around since the Golden Dawn days. But I do think that most of us who still do it are a little low key on it. And I think, I'm still in the process of getting back to that and rebuilding all the tools and equipment needed, accumulating it slowly over time, hoping to do it more properly this time. But even my childhood efforts, without all the bells and whistles, definitely had some very interesting results.
Oh, that's awesome. Like I said, I've not really worked with D, but I would like to. I mean, the irony is that like pseudo D is my grimoire of choice, right? The Velos Veneri Negrossassor. But one day we'll find our way back to the OG, I'm sure.
Mhm.
Absolutely.
It's like Key's like, I do be scrying, but I have not yet been scrying those aethers.
It's very true. The D material is definitely something that I do like want to experiment with, but I'm kind of in the same camp where I'm like, okay, when I commit to this, I'm really gonna commit to it.
Hmm.
And
Yeah.
Enochian is not the most compatible with time,
But hey,
at least from my understanding.
we just did a Nosferatu episode and they were speaking in Enochian, right? Like that's what the language was in the scripts, and in the original Nosferatu, that's what Nosferatu speaks. And this time they tried to do
Mhm.
reconstructed Dacian, right? So it's all gonna come back.
That it will.
That it will. That it will.
A worthy endeavor.
Hmm.
I think, I think that's one of the things I write, like the prominence of Enochian in popular culture, like the way it's bled into popular culture, just kind of speaks to just how influential notions of the angelical are across the board, like even beyond occultism, even beyond Orthodox religion. Um, there's so many accounts, so many like stories people have of like, oh, even people who aren't Christian or necessarily, from a religion that we would recognize as Abrahamic, or like people who are agnostic, even atheists will describe encounters and they're like, oh yeah, it was an angel, which has always been really interesting to me. And even like, that fascination with them is also present in magic for obvious reasons. Like we have manuscripts like those of Dr. Rudd, which deals with the various choirs, the magical treatises of Solomon and its various forms, with the Greek Mass, you often placing emphasis on planetary angels or the angels ruling certain hours of the day and times, as well as their contrary demons. And we're going to get to the topic of fallen angels and why they're such a valuable aid as we go through the episode as well. Um, I think though, like I kind of want to base this episode mostly on practical elements because as far as contextual stuff and how these spirits are perceived, there's so many different ways and like attitudes and understandings of them. It would just be exhaustive to discuss them. It's definitely not something we can like summarize a list out just one podcast episode, right? I mean, like, you know, Islamic understandings, Christian, Judaic understandings are all very different. And you guess, as you can guess, we're gonna go through like, oh, how do Protestants understand? How do Anglicans, how do Catholics understand them? So obviously we're going to focus mostly on the Christian understanding, both Eastern Orthodox, Free Swinger, and for Key and myself from a more, I guess, Western perspective. But I mean, like even when it comes to like religion, you got a distinction between theological and popular interpretations of angels and their actions. Like the writings of philosophers like Augustine, Aquinas, Pseudo Dionysius, average tenant farmer probably wasn't thinking about that when he was thinking about angels, right? When he's, making his irregular visit to church.
Mhm.
And the thing I really love about magical literature in this regard is that it does seem to blend these viewpoints fairly often. Like you have these often dangerous and fiery spirits, obviously very biblical. But if you've read these, if you've read these diaries, they don't fuck around. They aren't particularly patient, especially for human bullshit. But there is usually a kind of innate beneficence in writings concerning them, like you mentioned earlier. And this isn't set in stone. Sometimes, much like popular traditions around saints, this is absent, and you'll still see them called to kill people and things like that. But warnings like, hey, this good angel will cut off your head if you call them, is not really present in the same way in most magical texts. It's not the norm, even if we do encounter it. That, we do know that the authors would be mentioning that, because they do mention that for aerial spirits, for devils, and other like diverse wicked spirits. And when they talk about leaving the circle and spirits bashing your arm, for example, as a few German texts do, they don't really mention that in respect to angels. Even though the way that Jewish tradition kind of perceives them does sometimes indicate that, they can be very punitive in nature. And I'd say, like, this punitive nature is less prominent within the Greco-Latin sphere, especially when it comes to magical literature. It is still there, but it's mostly trace amounts. And, I find the fact that there's such a blend of, learned magic, familiarity with theological sources, but the angels being called on are not really limited solely to that domain. It's really reminiscent to the PGM, right? And I love that. Like a bunch of manuals that were in possession of clerics, and they were familiar with that. But is it purely clerical text? Is it purely clerical methods? Absolutely not. And that I think is why angelic magic is so fun. It's got that same kind of energy.
Yeah, yeah. Especially with like whenever you're calling a daimon to speak to you, that comes in the office of their deity and is representing them and speaks for them and has the authority to do so. They're essentially an angel in that way. They're functioning in the capacity in the office of an angel, an angelos, and they are able to speak to you directly, largely because of that conferred power.
Exactly, yeah. Like it's a functional relationship in that context, right? Like it's
Mhm.
a office assumed whether permanently or temporarily, whereby they are acting as intermediaries of a certain divine power. And that's I think that's one of the things that is kind of stepped on is just how prominent these beings, this category of beings are. It's not just in Abrahamic religion, it's also in polytheistic religion. Like if you look at the texts of Neoplatonists, you will see reference to angelical beings. They're everywhere. And I think one of the consequences of this, right, especially when we come to things like theological texts, is that there's a lot of weird arguments over niche topics that don't necessarily strike the mind as immediately pressing for those of us who are looking to call them as practicing magicians, right? So, like the physicality of angels, whether they have free will, which is probably one of the most loaded questions that you can get. Uh, like let's put a Thomas and a rabbi in a room and ask him this, right? You can sit back for a few hours and just enjoy the show, watch as the chairs start flying across the room.
Mm.
Um, and on that note, I've got to ask, who do you guys ref on this one? Are you with the rabbi? Are you with the Thomist? And how do you duck that inevitable flying chair?
Well, okay, there's this uh Arabic charm that I saw that Key and I tried, which is to make things move on their own. And I would you're supposed to you're supposed to have it on wood, or papyrus or whatever like that. And yes, you made in a particular hour and day. But anyway, like I have a version of it on wood, and I would take that and I would like slap it on the chair and pray to God and the angels and the jinn to levitate the chair and make it miss me. In shorter answer, I would probably duck. But my hope, like my true hope, is to be like that chick in that like Waffle House that like grabbed the chair out of thin air. Do you guys
Mhm.
remember that? And like plucked it out of thin air and like swirled it around.
Yeah, yeah.
you
I
know,
think
you, oh, sorry, go on, Key.
I think there are two paths, perhaps alternate paths to the ones that Svinga would take to dodge such a chair. One of which is to be uh, the 8-year-old boy at Sunday school carrying 4 folding
Oh,
chairs.
oh yeah.
Oh,
See,
he's
that's the
going to
thing.
impress. He's
Oh
going to
my God,
impress the
he's gonna
cute Sunday school
impress.
teacher, isn't he?
He's gonna impress. Because this is so key too, is he would put all the chairs on their both arms and just like waddle off with them.
Yeah, yeah.
I like how Key and I are dodging the actual question of whether or not you agree
Mhm.
that angels have no free will or if they do have free will.
They're just,
I
this
think
all right. You guys are just proving the point when I said it's very loaded.
Mhm.
It
I
is it is loaded and I
the answer that gets me even closer to the sun, but is still, I think, an artful dodge, is I would personally appear in the guise of an angel to Swedenborg and demand that he tell Kant that he got duped by Hume.
yes, yes, I super agree. Okay, I agree. I agree. Swedenborgians, hit us up. We gotta do a Swedenborg episode. And yes, absolutely. Just be like, hey Kant, guess what? Hume fucked you over, and then just like
Oh yeah.
drop the fucking intro like Mike and be out of there. Um Sorry, we're useless, Salt.
The historically Johnny Appleseed was a Swedenborgian minister, so
Fucking there we go.
we're
He's
multi-track drifting.
Johnny Appleseed, American Kaiju. This is the problem, is like guys, if you're on our Patreon and you ask us questions into Q&A, this is kind of the vibe. It's just Frightful Howls After Dark. So consider subscribing, patreon.com/, the Frightful Howls. If you have free will, you may be tempted to do so.
If you are an angel in our Patreon, hit the DMs. We gotta know.
For real.
You do have free will or not. I guess that's how we'll find out, right?
Mhm.
I mean, that is the best way, right? Is like, the scientific approach to answer the question is ask the angels to stop the chair using their free will if they have it. And if not, you might just have to take the L.
Mhm.
No, it's like in before you're asking like Raphael, like, do you have free will? And Raphael's like, do fucking you? And I'm like, wait, no, I am not
Really?
having a Calvinist argument with Mr. Trumpet man. Enough. No predestination for me. Thank you very much. I'm too much of a witch. Um,
Oh man. The This is also convergent upon like the justification that you hear from a lot of root workers as to like why magic works. It's like it's the will of God. So free
yes.
will is like just a question mark at the end of the day.
Yes, like friends of mine who do Arabic magic are saying like a lot of like the theological explanation for like why it works is like, well, Allah didn't stop it, so
Hmm.
bottom text. And honestly, work. Here's the thing is like Salt knows this very well, probably better than anyone else on the planet, which is that my witchcraft makes me into the most like free will affirming creature at times. For myself, not necessarily for angels. And
Mhm.
so it's like and so like my takes on things are, especially if I'm really like ever doing a lot of witchcraft, it's just like very witches are anti-faith type stuff, and
Mhm.
then Salt will be just like, well, you see, if you will consult the graphs and point to my birth chart where where it's noticeably that is already present, that I'm gonna feel that way about things anyway, and then we just go back and forth.
That's the way. That's the way.
Mhm.
It's how it's gonna be. It's how it's gonna be. Yeah, I mean, this is what I mean. Like angels are fun. Like everyone has these images of them as these high and mighty, noble celestial beings and different to the whole world, and that's definitely true. But when us mortals look above and we start thinking, hmm, then it gets funny. It gets entertaining. And speaking of entertaining, we're gonna get even spicier because now I'm going to ask, can angels fall? And now the chairs are turned into
Oh
tables.
shit. Yes.
Yes.
The key is like yes, and one of the reasons they fell is because I let loose my long hair and sauntered over. It's like woohoo, gentlemen, you know.
Oh my god. You guys know more intimately than most that I am a lover of their ability to fall. And
You're
I
like
will
more
leave.
of that one, please. He's like the evil witch at the mountain, being like, "Hello, boys."
Oh my god, literally. But no, I'm far too far too Luciferian pilled in my day to day to have anything less.
Mm.
The honestly, like I love Dionysius. Like he is the Celestial Hierarchy is probably one of my favorite books out there. Um, and I'm sure a lot of our readers and listeners are acquainted with the Celestial Hierarchy as well, even if not directly, they've definitely encountered it implicitly through, writings of Agrippa, Rudd, and so on. It's so prominent, and the importance of the Celestial Hierarchy is really pressed home in one passage, which I think is really inspiring language. And I also want to like kind of briefly mention here because we make a lot of jokes about my fixation on like the celestial bureaucracy and stuff like that. And I welcome those jokes. I find them really entertaining. But really, that's kind of just us making light of what is an expression of heaven's plan and intention for the world and the cosmos as a whole. And to me, like Pseudo Dionysius in this passage really captures why these divine hierarchies and orders are so beautiful in the first place in words far better than I'll ever be able to express.
And I have to say one thing, if you're an occultist, if you're someone who is interested in like the Western canon of occultism, if that's kind of your thing, your modality, Pseudo Dionysius and Michael Psellos probably like no two authors that are more important to actually look into.
Truly, especially in the context of like the ordering and arranging of the world and the spirits inhabiting it. Like you can't neglect them. You just can't.
Hmm
Mhm.
And here is key with one of the many arguments as to why this is the case, taken from Pseudo Dionysius, The Celestial Hierarchy, Chapter 3.
Hierarchy is, in my opinion, a holy order and knowledge and activity which, so far as is attainable, participates in the divine likeness. It is lifted up to the illuminations given it from God, and correspondingly toward the imitation of God. Now, the beauty of God, being unific, good, and the source of all perfection, is wholly free from dissimilarity, and bestows its own light upon each according to his merit. and in the most divine mysteries perfects them in accordance with the unchangeable fashioning of those who are being perfected harmoniously to itself. The aim of hierarchy is the greatest possible assimilation to and union with God, and by taking him as leader in all holy wisdom, to become like him so far as is permitted by contemplating intently his most divine beauty. Also, it molds and perfects its participants in the holy image of God like bright and spotless mirrors, which receive the ray of the supreme deity, which is the source of light, and being mystically filled with the gift of light, it pours it forth again abundantly, according to the divine law, upon those below itself.
Every time I read this, I love it. Like, we have this notion of pouring down, right? It's a very physical description, where we have this, illumination of what is below from above. And then we also, obviously, by that illumination, what is below has access to the higher powers, to divinity, right? And so we see, like, you know, Svinga mentioned the role of angels as messengers. And what is it exactly? Like, what message are they carrying? And it is inherently the will of divinity. And this is not, we're mostly focusing on a Christian perspective here, but it is not limited solely to Christianity. It's not solely limited to Abrahamic religion as a whole. It is generally, it is something that is prominent in multiple religions across the world, both extant and past. And that is this is why it's so important. On top of, the essential pragmatic elements of hierarchy, where, like, oh yeah, you call the spirits boss. Like, that is very much a simplification of what is actually going on. And Dionysius, or Pseudo Dionysius rather, divides the angelical orders into 9 groups or choirs, and these are subdivided amongst themselves into 3 larger groups. And we can understand these as being categorized according to their proximity from the unity and simplicity of God. And this proximity is not really a physical one in nature. It does evoke a feeling of physical proximity, but really what we're talking about is in respect to the explicit nature and participation of these angelical orders to that same divinity. And I want to point out here that we find similar hierarchies expressed throughout creation. Even human beings as individuals, we have our intelligible and intellectual portion, right? The most refined, immortal component man has, his truest self, the ideas within the mind of God. We have the soul capable of its discursive reasoning, motion, and its celestial clothing, the quintessential spirits, with its subsidiary terrestrial and vaporous spirits originating from the terrestrial body. So this kind of threefold hierarchy is found even in individual people. So when we come to Pseudo Dionysius, we should understand that this angelical hierarchy is taking place in a capacity that is very much similar to the rest of the way that the universe itself is understood as being structured and composed. And he does briefly mention this in chapter 10 even, where he says,
"This may fittingly be added, that each celestial and human intelligence contains in itself its own first, middle, and last powers, which are manifested in a way analogous to the aforesaid ordination belonging to each of the hierarchical illuminations."
exactly, like it's something holy, it's sacred, relating to the generational cosmos, its daily activity and motion, and ultimately, it all comes down to the origin, which is God, right? Unity, oneness, simplicity, goodness, the good. And this is why he starts off by discussing the intellectual and intelligible orders of angels in chapter 6 and 7.
Yeah, I think one of the really cool parts about this too is that this goes all the way back to Origin of Alexandria as well, who also likewise saw a tripartite nature to man that relates to the 3 different ways of understanding and analyzing the Bible, like of scripture, right? You have like the purely literal meaning, you have the rhetorical meaning, or allegorical meaning, and then you have like the kind of philosophical, deeper, mystical meaning that corresponds to soul, spirit, and body in reverse order.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah, it's like the number of threefold attributions. There's clearly something special about the number 3 in Trinities, right? It's hard to guess what that might be.
Yeah, like the literal moral and spiritual readings of the Bible actually also descend from a Jewish method of interpretation and used in St. Paul in the Epistle to the Galatians, chapter 4. So there's just a lot like this, and plus it's much like Plato, right? Like the 3 kinds of souls, the nutritive, the affective, the emotive, and then the spiritual, the mental. Like this is all over antiquity.
Yeah, exactly. And this is why chapter 10 is probably my favorite chapter in the entire book because he's actively tying this like this division of the tripartite being to these hierarchies, right? And that is part of the reason why the celestial hierarchy is a certified Shadow Wizard Money Gang classic.
We do love talking about whether or not angels have free will.
We do. And I have chosen today a handful of quotes. It was actually kind of difficult to choose them because basically every single passage from that book is so fucking quotable. Like a lot of philosophical texts just put you to sleep. Not Pseudo Dionysius. Like the language is beautiful and descriptive. Like you can really feel the love in the writing. But to start with, we'll go off from the top. So if Svinga would note, as chapter 6 says,
In the first rank of all he places those who, as we are told, dwell eternally in the constant presence of God and cleave to him, and above all others are immediately united to him. And he says that the teachings of the Holy Word testify that the most holy thrones and many-eyed and many-winged ones, named in the Hebrew tongue cherubim and seraphim, are established immediately about God and nearest to him above all the others. Our venerable hierarch describes this threefold order as co-equal unity, and truly the most exalted of the hierarchies, the most fully godlike, and the most closely and immediately united to the first light of the Godhead.
and in chapter 7, we do find this further expanded upon.
The first order of celestial beings which are established about God, immediately encircling him, and in perpetual purity they encompass his eternal knowledge in that most high and eternal angelic dance, wrapped in the bliss of manifold and blessed contemplations, and irradiated with pure and primal splendors.
As well, the name seraphim clearly indicates their ceaseless and eternal revolution about divine principles. Their heat and keenness, the exuberance of their intense, perpetual, tireless activity, and their elevative and energetic assimilation of those below, kindling them and firing them to their own heat, and wholly purifying them by a burning and all-consuming flame, and by the unhidden, unquenchable, changeless, radiant, and enlightening power, dispelling and destroying the shadows of darkness.
The name cherubim denotes their power of knowing and beholding God, their receptivity to the highest gift of light, their contemplation of the beauty of the Godhead in its first manifestation, and that they are filled by participation in divine wisdom, and bounteously outpour to those below them from their own font of wisdom.
The name of the most glorious and exalted thrones denotes that which is exempt from and untainted by any base and earthly thing, and the supermundane ascent up the steep. For those have no part in that which is lowest, but dwell in fuller power, immovably and perfectibly established in the Most High, and receive the divine immanence above all passion and matter, and manifest God being attentively open to divine participations.
Nailed it!
Love me some Pseudo Dionysus, so always
Seriously.
happy.
Mm-hmm.
Oh yeah, we got plenty more of him today. I think one of the one of the things that really speaks out to me in these passages is they are really fulfilling the role of messengers in this respect, like imparting that divine light, the truth of the most high and noble to the hierarchies below them. You know, they're unceasing, they never change, they're eternal in their activity and likeness to God. And it's through this first order of angels who perpetually are singing praises that the divine likeness is imparted to the subordinate orders, to the angels beneath them. There is a chain occurring through them by which divinity is known. And this, like when we're talking about messengers, what is the message that they're carrying? What's this? And in respect to the second order, the chain continues, it keeps going downwards and downwards. And the second order is obviously covered in the next chapter, which states,
The name given to the holy dominion signifies, I think, a certain unbounded elevation to that which is above, freedom from all that is of the earth, and from all inward inclination to the bondage of discord, a liberal superiority to harsh tyranny, an exemptness from degrading servility and from all that is low, for they are untouched by any inconsistency. They are true lords, perpetually aspiring to true lordship and to the source of lordship, and they providentially fashion themselves and those below them, as far as possible, into the likeness of true lordship. They do not turn towards vain shadows, but wholly give themselves to that true authority, forever one with the godlike source of lordship.
The name of the holy virtues signifies a certain powerful and unshakable virility, welling forth into all their godlike energies, not being weak and feeble for any reception of the divine illuminations granted to it, mounting upwards in fullness of power to an assimilation with God, never falling away from the divine life through its own weakness, but ascending unwaveringly to the super essential virtue which is the source of virtue, fashioning itself, as far as it may, in virtue, perfectly turned towards the source of virtue, and flowing forth providentially to those below it, abundantly filling them with virtue.
The name of the holy powers, co-equal with the divine dominions and virtues, signifies an orderly and unconfined order in the divine receptions, and the regulation of intellectual and supramundane power, which never debases its authority by tyrannical force, but is irresistibly urged onward in due order to the divine. It beneficently leads those below it, as far as possible, to the supreme power, which is the source of power, which it manifests after the manner of angels in the well-ordered ranks of its own authoritative power.
So the second order of angels inherits that divine light for the first order, as we previously mentioned. It's a kind of participation where they inherit and transmit amongst themselves. Now, as an astrologer, obviously the second order is the one that has the most immediate interest for me, at least. The planetary intelligences, for example, are generally denoted as belonging to the choir of powers, and have been a major component of my work for a long time. I'm sure this is true for many of our readers as well, especially the intelligences explicitly mentioned by Agrippa. I know this is the case for both Singer and Key as well.
Oh yeah, like the intelligences are always a huge part of the kind of work that I do when I work planetary magic from like an angelic perspective. And one, you can see why homeboy Pseudonasius is repeating the word like virtue, virtue, virtue all the time, because they do be
Mhm.
manifesting that way. You know, like singing eternal praises to God, but then also literally channeling that light into the like note like where we were going over dominions, virtues, and powers. Like you literally are going through the way that like the universe is ordered and maintained and actually like
Mhm.
rigorously like made custodian of through these beings.
Yeah, and you're also seeing like their actual names that have relation to their function, to their office, to their influence on the world at large. Like the
Mhm.
way that they are named indicates their, what they do, so to speak. And this is, I think this is kind of key because as we move down the hierarchy, we kind of see the way that they are acting. They become, we're moving from the upper crust to the immediate bureaucracy, the governors and ministers, the administration, and the front line of the divinely imposed order. If God is the origin and master of everything, the first order of the three angelic choirs is the immediate council privy to his hearing. The second are like the officials managing the orders of the council, drafting. The third is more immediate in nature, taking action, making them to occur. I think there's one respect to like the planetary intelligence. It's also like, the celestial intelligences, like the intelligences of fixed stars, for example. Like the way that they are still kind of above more terrestrial offices where things are constantly in flux, right? Because the first order of angels is very much unchanging, unceasing. They're described very much in language which is immutable in character. The second office is less so. Like they take charge over the heavens, they take charge over the moving of stars, which, if we go Aristotelian for a moment, to the classical mind were generally understood as repeating themselves. They were moving in accordance with their own nature, but this nature was consistent, which is very distinct from material substances, which are very liable to change, which are very liable to the process of generation and corruption. And that actually brings us to the third hierarchy, which is closest to this process of generation and corruption. Still, above, still elevated. They're not mortal creatures, but they are the ones directly ministering to the people, to the world, to the living creatures upon it. And this is the reason that Pseudo-Dionysius takes explicit mention and reference to the national angels, right? The angelical intelligence is governing the nations of men, imparting the divine message to the nations is kind of their responsibility, amongst more typical things that we might expect from them. And in this chapter, he describes them thus.
The name of these celestial principalities signifies their godlike princeliness and authoritativeness in an order which is holy and most fitting to the princely powers, and that they are wholly turned toward the Prince of Princes and lead others in a princely fashion, and that they are formed as far as possible in the likeness of the source of principality, and reveal its supercelestial order by the good order of the princely powers.
The choir of the holy archangels is placed in the same threefold order as the celestial principalities, for, as has been said, there is one hierarchy and order which includes these and the angels. But since each hierarchy has first, middle, and last ranks, the holy order of archangels, through its middle position, participates in the two extremes, being joined with the most holy principalities and with the holy angels.
For the angels, as we have said, fill up and complete the lowest choir of all the hierarchies of the celestial intelligences, since they are the last of the celestial beings possessing the angelic nature. And they, indeed, are more properly named angels by us than are those of a higher rank, because their choir is more directly in contact with the manifested and mundane things.
Oh yeah.
I love that each one has to repeat the actual word all the time. The princely powers, principalities.
Yeah,
Prince of
yeah.
princes. The virtue of virtues.
Listen, you gotta, if you're gonna be calling yourself the virtues, you'd best be having virtues. You best be dispensing virtues. You best be virtuing the virtues, right?
Fucking facts. Co-signed, because that was some real shit that you just said. Says Michael Psellos.
So the spitting facts. But yeah, I mean, so you can see these angelical orders are divided into these groups, partly in accordance with their own nature, by their responsibility and offices. As we've mentioned, the repetition of their names is really a demonstration of this in action. But it's also obviously in accordance with their proximity to divinity, with the higher imparting to the lower, and in turn, they also impart that same light to us as well, to mundane, to material things. You can see, right, there's a kind of process of becoming almost through these texts. Like we start off with very abstract principles, with divinity is very distant, and it gradually comes down and down to us so that we are also able to participate and experience this same divine beauty. And, this chain of being is just one of many such chains. It's an exemplar amongst these chains of imparting that understanding, but it's also a means by which that same chain can be ascended. And talking about ascending that chain, let's get into the practical stuff, right? Like, how do we talk about engaging with them in practice, in our operations, in our experiments? And I think probably one of the more fun subjects to start with would be guardian angels, right? Because this is one of the subjects that used to be, it had a trend period. Like more recently, we've had folk Catholic and witchcraft, we've had fairies, we've had fixed stars kind of coming up in popular, the worst word on the planet, but popular culture. But before all of that, in the late 2000s, early 2010s, and for a really long time before that as well, probably the most like talked about subject was the Holy Guardian Angel, right? Everyone was fixated on it. Obviously, there was a lot of influence from Thelema. And we know Abraham Mellon obviously being a very major work that was, very, very popular for a period of time. And there's also so many rituals intended to call on a good angel and various grimoires, usually quite resemblant to each other in form and structure, which were almost certainly intended to call on this guardian angel. We have the subject of the angel and nativity, so on. So, I spent half the episode ranting so far, so I want to hear what you guys have to say on this subject first, as far as practical experiences and perceptions of this guardian angel.
I love this question because, like I said, Abramelin was something that I definitely was conscious of, and because of my relationship with one of my main spirits, I was always really curious to actually explore these notions of like patrons and like guardian, primary, like the big spirit that guides your life, it guides your destiny, and so on. And because there's a lot of like through Thelema, I think the notion of a holy guardian angel became really popular too, right? As like a thing you could acquire through Abramelin or something that you could acquire through other means. And there's been a lot of discourses on like among occultists about what this exactly is. Some people say that the spirit that shows up for you if you complete Abramelin is like a very particular kind of spirit. Like that's the holy guardian angel. Other forms of contacting spirits that may fulfill similar offices are not the same thing. Like they can serve a very similar function for you, but the HGA in Abramelin is its own unique being that you can only get from that particular method, and like that's that. Other people that I've spoken to who've done the ritual as it actually says, and also both like just a big version, like the long version, right, and just the shorter version. That's one is quite nearly double the time than the other. And I'm not referring to just like a Bornless one or Crowley's takes on this, or just like doing the headless one ritual from the PGM. I just mean like doing Abramelin pretty much as it's outlined in the book. People have said like, yeah, like I did it, and the spirit that showed up did give me access to the Aberlin word squares, like give me my own versions of them, right? That you're supposed to get your own, not necessarily use the ones that are existing in the book. But ultimately this is a spirit that like I already knew in some capacity from the past, or like was already with me in the past. And that this some people have had like very particular experiences that this HGA being is essentially like you if you had never heard of Abermelin and you lived in a society where like this book was never even going to be in print, you know what I mean? Like, would it be impossible to contact this particular spirit? No. But others say that like it is. So again, like it's a toss-up. Personally, I actually have done Abermelin. Um, I thankfully was at a point in my life where I could afford a spiritual retreat. I did the 6-month version. I think it was pretty much equinox to equinox, really. I started in March and I ended off in September. And the spirit that showed up was very much a new form and a new guise of a spirit that I'd already known that plays that role for me. So, some might hear that and be like, well, then you didn't do it right, because it's supposed to be a different spirit that shows up that's your HGA. Cool. Thanks for your opinion. But I did the practice, I did the work, and I honestly like pretty much obeyed its like restrictions, like its increasing restrictions like quite seriously. And I happened to have that period of my life off where I didn't have to be in school and I didn't have to be at work. So I was able to kind of hermit my way through. Kind of like so you were saying when you did Ars Notoria, like someone asked you in a Q&A, like, did you really go monk mode? And you were like, yeah, I really did go monk mode to make Notoria work.
Yeah, yeah. Sometimes you get those opportunities in life, and it's like, okay, this is the perfect time to just quickly knuckle down and do this.
Mm,
Like,
yeah. So like maybe the spirit of mine is so attached to me and so much like a guiding head spirit, for lack of a better term, that like they're gonna cannibalistically be in any conjuration that I do for such a patron. Or so maybe that's more about me. But either way, that's the spirit that showed up and in the sense of like re-showed up, re-revealed themselves and became even more prominently featured and acquired these new guises by which they could show me other things about themselves because of the nature of the purification that this ritual does to you and the very like serious like death and rebirth you undergo in those last days when you start binding everything. Um, but so it was well worth my effort, absolutely. But I would say that like in general, though, there are lots of other spirits that can it's one of those things like, are we talking about an office or a species? You know what I mean? A spirit. Because like
yeah,
there's so many spirits that will take on the office of like guardian, tutelary, primary spirit. For some people in folk magic and witchcraft practices, this is their like familiar. For others, it's like a spirit lover. For some people, this is going to be like a main tutor. It can be like the main spirit in the system that they practice that is like the most important system to them. So like this could be like a head deity. This could be like a primary patron. This could also be for some people like a diamond, like Key and I have written and spoken about our experiences conjuring diamonds, multiple types of diamonds, or pahedroi from the PGM. And these are different spirits, like each of them, and they come from different deities to us, and they do different things. But if that was your primary practice, there's no reason why your PGM daimon couldn't be your primary spirit. I mean, after all, like some of them explicitly are even described as essentially doing everything an HGA can do and essentially being responsible for the custodianship of your soul and ensuring that the magician in the afterlife has like a proper royal afterlife befitting of like an Egyptian pharaoh, where their soul skips the underworld and instead attaches itself directly to the car or train of the gods. So that sounds very holy guardian angel to me. And so I'm not saying this like um, devalue like any of these individual rituals, but more to actually elevate all of them by saying they're all excellent ways where you could do this. And sometimes you're drawn to a very particular one because of the nature of that spirit and the way that they're simultaneously courting you to come closer to them, as opposed to just you picking one randomly based on your needs and availability.
I love this. Yeah,
Mhm.
I think you really hit the nail on the head. Especially like, is this an office? Is it a species of spirit? And if it is an office, obviously, like there's so many different ways that another spirit can fulfill that role even outside of that context. Like, yeah, I think like I love this answer. And the fact that you've actually gone and done Abram Mellon is another testimony here.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny because I kind of felt that earlier in my throat where I was like, why am I being fake modest about this? No, I did it. Like, I actually did it. Like, point blank. Um, I was in my undergrad and I got it done. And it's not something I talk about very much, but like, I have a right to talk about it then? I have actually done it exactly as, yes, it is the 6-month version, but like, I did every step, right?
I think that experience is always going to speak a lot louder than whenever people are speculating about the nature of that spirit and how they're showing up might be.
I was obsessed with the idea of the HGA for a long time because of this experience that I already had with this main spirit of mine. So, like, if you know
Mhm.
me in person, you know what I'm talking about. But, like, it was one of those things where I was like, I wanted to contextualize what it is to have a spirit that guards and directs your life to such a sweeping degree and is so invested in being what connects you to the gods and what gets you to your, like, quote unquote, like, Crowley would say true will, right? But, like, your reason, your purpose, that puts you in an Aristotelian state of eudaimonia, of like true flourishing. And for a witch, it's a very complicated thing to answer, because witchcraft is so antisocial and anti-human. So it's one of those things that like, but the spirit balances that for me, and so that's why I wanted to go see what these rituals are about, to be like, who else will come, or will it be a broader and deeper revealing of this spirit's nature?
Mm-hmm. That's beautiful, honestly. And I think, that's a massive part, a massive function of these rituals, right? Is that experiential element where we unveil and uncover that spirit relationship or nature, like their relationship with us. We develop it, we build it, but we also learn more about them. We learn about the offices they can take or their particular individual natures. Like, and that's, I think that's kind of the fundamental uh, underlying motivation to pursue these rituals beyond, just explicitly seeking power and things like that, is learning more about our spirits, engaging with them, becoming closer with them. And in respect to this particular subject, like the concept of guardian angels and so on, I think it is one that does have to be, experiential in nature. I don't think it is something that is easy to prescribe or put into a singular box. I think that would be a limitation on it, even that we don't necessarily want to impose on our spirits, on the spirits around us that are caretaking for us, that are assisting us, that are supporting us. So I really really love your answer on this one, and I think that kind of covers all the bases that I had in mind when we're bringing up this topic.
Yeah, definitely. Like, it is a really beautiful experience, and I think a really valuable one for everyone listening that you shared, because like it just exposes exactly what the function of these things is intended to be and how they interact with humanity. Like, one of the things that has always really struck me about uh, Pseudo-Dionysus is the emphasis on interaction with the angels of the great chain, if you will. Um, like, the light that eventually trickles down to you through their lenses and mirrors is elevative. Like, the more you interact, the higher you will climb that chain just by the nature of interaction.
Mm.
Um,
Yeah, it's also present in polytheistic theurgy, right? This understanding,
right.
like all the way back to Iamblichus and more, that if you attach yourself to the vehicles of the deities that you're trying to cultivate a relationship with, it will pull you upwards, like in an ascent,
Mhm.
and it will drive your mind and your nous, your intellect, into their domain, which also frees you from the trappings of the flesh that will prevent you from going that direction when you die, really.
Mhm.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, like, the angels being fixed is that perfect mirror that shows that we are not.
Hmm.
Luckily, in our orientation as humanity toward God,
Hmm.
or all the gods for that matter. But yeah, I think like even in the exploration of the daimon, as we've written about it and as we've experienced it since, is participating in the same dilution of light, that dilution of whatever numinous and divine. I don't want to call it energy. We'll just leave it at exactly that, the light,
Mhm,
and
Oh my
allowing
God,
that.
it's so hard when you have to use the word energy, but you don't mean it in the way people think you mean it.
Yeah, literally. Because I'm
Real.
like, it's like the to draw on like other comparisons, like the force that allows us to ascend higher. That
Mhm.
same pushing and driving
Towards
ascendancy.
beauty. Mhm.
Exactly. Yeah. For the good, the capital G, the good.
Absolutely. We're getting theurgical up in here. We're getting theurgical up in here today. We've managed to get the witches to talk about the ascent today.
Oh my God, it's like Key and I just like being the little gremlins on Salt's shoulders, like always like posting our witchcraft.
the you both have a very strong inner fear. You're just low key about it. I do love that. the I think one of the things as well that kind of comes to mind when it comes to angelical operations as well, just to bring the subject back to like the pragmatics again, right? Is the way the materia kind of plays a bit of a less prominent role at times. I know Svinger, you've also had like similar experiences to me in this regard. Well, actually, you know what, Keith, as well, because I mean, we talked about this at the very start of the episode, right? Like, you can get away with much simpler operations, depending on the context that you're working. Like, there's always that emphasis on purity and innate cleanness, talking about the soul, talking about theurgy, that is necessary with this kind of work. And I don't really think you can successfully pick up a crystal stone in your hand or call them into a circle, even with the full ritual paraphernalia. If inwardly, you're scorning heaven, scorning God, you might have a moment, but angelical intelligence, in my experience, do place a lot of emphasis on that inequality, which makes sense from a theological and religious perspective, but also in respect to their office, in respect to their role. Like, how could you not possess that when you're in their presence, right? They're bringing it with them.
Mhm.
They're messengers. You can't escape it. Um, and I think, going in with that kind of virtue as a result does kind of compensate and do a lot of the heavy lifting in this kind of work, which is, somewhat different to other avenues of practice where we might be really placing emphasis on physical materials, on mundane qualities of objects. So, at least in my experience, there does tend to be a bit more room as far as using less intensive ritual procedures than we might use when calling on aerial spirits, for example. I do think there's a caveat though, in that with simplified operations, especially when you're contacting them for the first time, there's less, I want to say compulsion, but less obligation on their part. Like, you aren't walking in with the same authority, the same license that you have when you're bringing something like the proper talismans and layman's, having fasted for a few days, performing the operation on a sacred table or whatever implements are necessary. Those are like, the ritual tools that they acknowledge, they respect. And whilst the celestial intelligences are spirits with a divine office and mission, they will hear our prayers and our requests. I think it is a means of getting them to listen as much as anything. And this often is the role that I found these tools to have in respect to angelical works, which is, still the case in other operations, but sometimes other aspects are emphasized as well, like the unique qualities of a certain material towards, inciting agitation or heat in someone, for example. So I guess, I'm curious if your guys' experience with them has been this way. It sounds like it has been, but that's kind of been the case on my end, has been, with these particular spirits, it tends towards the simpler unless there is a very explicit need to make sure that they are answering and responding and so on.
Mhm. Yeah, I mean, I think that's what struck me about destroying spirits into crystals was just
Mm-hmm.
that it actually was coming through like that. It was not something where I was like, there was not a huge, I mean, there's a stress on purity, absolutely. Like in terms of making sure my mind was pure, making sure that like I had prayed, making sure that I was not distracted. Like I noticed that I couldn't really get this one angel to come one time because I was literally just very distracted. And it wasn't because like my robe was not perfectly linen or something like that. You know what I mean? Like it was, and I also honestly I don't really do a lot of ritual robes. Like I do wear colors for certain spirits, and obviously like in certain practices like in Kimbanda, I do wear the colors that I have the right to wear, as it were, like according to my rank. But really, it's a matter of I try and be modest, and I try to wear I often like um light colors, or for planetary angels, I might dress it up for that particular planet or particular like the vibe of the planet, right? So like for Jupiter, it'd be a lot of opulence for sure. Um, but which is ironic too, because sometimes like what actually helps me get Sachiel on the line is being very austere and monk-like. Um, but yeah, like that's just it's just some things to think about for me is really that angels do intervene on behalf of humanity. Like they part of the whole shtick with the falling angel stuff is that some didn't want to. And so one of the things that I find really fascinating about angelic magic, which again for me will always be centered first from a folk orthodox perspective, because I only got into grimoires to get something to talk about with other people. Since I can't speak super openly about my tradition, it was nice to be able to share something with other magicians that was actually accessible, that had a shared language and a shared metaphysics. And so that's why PGM and grimoires became something I could actually like use as a way to like communicate with others and actually bond over magic. But angelic magic, I think, has just been. Mm, I would not call any kind of magic safe. I would not say that any kind of magic comes without drawbacks, but I would say that spirits that in general demand a certain rigor from you, but are not inherently opposed to you, it's a helpful framework, absolutely. And they do respond to petitions, and they do respond especially to particular charitable needs, although they are not the best for like there's a reason why like in candomblé and then a lot of Afro-Brazilian traditions, you'll hear people say that like, oh, for this I'm gonna go to Exu Pombagira, I'm not gonna go to Orisha, because one, the nature of the question, and two, I need to get shit done right now. And it's not necessarily the most moral thing possible. It may not even be what's best for me, but I want it done. And angels are not like that. Like I'm not going to go to them for things that I, would use witchcraft for, or that I would use, I would go to my Eshu and Pomajita for. But like, not to say that those things are lesser or less powerful. Sorry, not to say those things are lesser. I just mean that there's a different moral hierarchy in play, and there's a different level of concern for a broader outcome. And
Yeah,
so in that way, yeah, I would say that it's a great place to start for a lot of things, and it's also a great way to teach you so that magic is real on on a budget.
oh, absolutely. Yeah, I definitely agree. Like, I think there's an element of not inability, but priorities with angels specifically. Like, they're first and foremost concerned with their mission and how it can serve, which is predominantly uplifting us, right? But uplifting us in their eyes is not necessarily getting paid, getting laid, and so on. It's
Mhm.
something more in line with Pseudo Dionysius's intentions, or what us low sorcerers might be, contemplating as uplifting.
Mhm.
But yeah, I think just on the earlier point of like the angels will respond. Um one of the biggest components for me in doing a lot of extremely bare bones operations, tool wise, or just kind of on the fly, that sounds a lot less respectful than I was trying to be, but like, some if I need to get shit done in a very short amount of time and it aligns with that goal, then sure, I'll make it happen. It's kind of just a matter of like, not to keep harping on pseudo Dionysus, but if you are in a state to be elevated, they will come and elevate you.
Yeah,
So I think a lot of the purity component of these operations is just to ensure that like, when you call upon them, they're going to bring that light whether or not you want it. So you better be in a state that it can hit you and bring you that healing or that medicine or that outcome that you want, including if that light is the burning laser beam of Sorath that is cursing people for you. Like, it's still the matter of, is that outcome actually going to make you a better person?
Mhm.
hmm
So I know, like, I don't know. It's something I've been reflecting on recently, especially in some conversations about the language of like purity and hangups about certain certain spirits, such as angels, and the ways that they are called, right? And I think I don't want to map a humanism onto it because it's definitely and strictly not that, but like I don't know, if it makes you a better person, then they're an agent that will bring you a lot of good in your life. The worst they can do is, you know, textually a lot of different things, but really you're probably not going to be struck down as Samael has gone about striking people down. They're just going to be like, okay, well, this would not benefit you right now, so goodbye.
I think a good episode to pair this one with is episode 25, Spiritual Hygiene and
Mhm.
Sympathetic Magic, because we talk about some of those purity hangups that people have, and rightly so. This is not like to shade anybody, like we all carry our baggage. Like in an ideal world, these terms would not evoke any complicated emotions in anybody, but we live in a Joker face paint society. You know, that is God, I can't help myself. I'm sorry. We really do genuinely live in a context of the Kamala thing. Stop, brain rot. Exit, exit.
It's okay. The angels will help you rise up.
Thank you, thank you. Got rise up gamers. All that has been and all that will. Anyway,
Do not come.
God. Okay, brain rot over. We do. I'm just gonna phrase it differently. No, we live in a. No, I'm done. I'm done.
You think I fell out of a Deva inhabited coconut tree?
Exactly. It is nasty. There are contexts in which we arise. And these are contexts full of baggage and hardship, like genuinely things that are not fun, things that are difficult, like hangups around sexuality, around what it means to be quote unquote pure, around religion. There's a lot of people who have a lot of really like bad experiences with Christianity, and they have like hangups around it, right? And like rightly so. And so then, recommending Christian magic for them, especially considering like this is something that like again I'm very comfortable engaging with because I've not had a negative experience on the whole with Christianity. It becomes a hard thing to bear. Absolutely. And so you have to meet people where they're at. But again, I love Salt that you were saying that angels are not like the property of Christianity, Judaism, Islam. There are angels. I mean, there are angels in these traditions, absolutely, and very codified, long-lasting understandings of them because these are continuous traditions that have not really been interrupted in the ways that they've conveyed themselves throughout the world. But absolutely, there are these spirits in every other kind of religion and polytheism.
Oh yeah, like even when even outside of the Western context, where we're not using the word angel, like as we might with anything tangentially related to the Greek sphere, but even outside of that context, there's all kinds of emissaries and messenger spirits who fulfill like the same role, where they possess the authority of that spirit, they imitating that divine being. And when they speak, they are actively speaking with that divine being's authority and license and office. So that, just because it's an angel speaking, the words they're speaking could be the words of God. So listen up, right? Like, that's I think that's kind of key. But like you're saying, like there's just so many different spirits that kind of fulfill this kind of role. And even though we have focused on the Christian element, I don't think that is, that this episode is solely useful in that context. Like it is, the fundamental principles are, I'm not going to say general, but like they are applicable in other contexts as well. And that I think that brings a lot of value. I think that brings a lot of potential for healing, for assisting other people, especially because what do they like to see? Well, they like to see you taking on a similar role to themselves, right? The entire idea is likeness, an imitation of things that are noble, that are higher, that uplift you and others with you, like the angels themselves, right? What's happening? What's going on? Well, the upper hierarchy is imparting to the lower, who are imparting to the ones beneath them, and so on and so forth. And in the same way, one of the things that they do generally appreciate quite a lot, quite deeply, is when we impart, the blessings that they're bestowing upon us to other people as well. And that doesn't necessarily, refer to teachings. It can refer to general charitable acts. It can refer to actions that are, I love this word, but securing merits, right? Meritorious service.
Mhm.
And in that kind of respect, like they are spirits who will encourage that, who will help you thrive through those same actions. And obviously, when you overcome challenges to do those things, then there is a reward in your relationship with that spirit, not necessarily in, a transactional sense of reward, but like very much explicitly the nourishing and development of that relationship, which in turn makes you capable of understanding that spirit better, of understanding their role, their relationship, and also, the divine likeness which they themselves are receiving. You can go through that way. For lack of a better word. Sorry, I'm having a bit of trouble with the language here, but I think you get the kind of idea that I'm putting forwards here. And for me, that's kind of really important. That's one of the keys to this kind of practice is developing that, being nourished by that. And sometimes we lose sight of that. Like I've gone through periods like that. Very unpleasant, very difficult, very horrible, frankly. Um, and when it finally returns, it's so healing, man. I don't want to, I don't want to get into like woo or sound or hippie and all that, but like it's healing. That divine light is healing. It is
No, don't be shy about saying it. It's true. I mean, why do we have so many mystical traditions intended to get you to that point, regardless of which beings you do it through?
exactly. And like, how that looks is going to differ for everyone. Like some people find themselves spiritually fulfilled when their life is relatively good in a material sense. Other people thrive better when they're ascetics, when they deny the comforts of the material thing, right? And there's very, I think, particular qualities. Like we even see that in the myth of our boy Saint Christopher, right? Like when he talks to the old hermit, what does he say when he's told, "Hey, you should fast"? I can't really do that. And listen, if the saint can say that, sometimes people can as well. In
Yeah,
my
yeah.
case, that's a preferred way of doing things, but to
Yeah.
each his own, right? To each his own. And part of the process of working with these spirits is discovering what one's own truly is, not in terms of just mere material preference or seeking comfort, but in terms of what the actual underlying truth of the matter is. Yeah, that's
Mhm.
how I see it.
Yeah. Like I said, there's many paths and there's many ways to walk them. And within every tradition, you will always see a saint or a bodhisattva or a sage or a shaman who has gone a different road and gotten there, the different means that was necessary. There's a reason why there's like a wrathful protectors and like violent beings that still serve the divine powers. There's reasons why there's rebellious spirits that seem to run contrary to these things that actually have a role, nevertheless, in the broader scheme. It's and there's also reasons to have systems that completely reject this schematics in the first place and have their own way that plug people into a particular path to righteousness and increased agency. I don't privilege any system over another. I think people are suited to different things. Maybe that's because salt it's in their chart and it already predicts that this is the kind of thing they'd be suited for anyway. Okay, I take your point. But for those of us who are very pro free will for witches and not so pro free will for angels, this is nevertheless an important thing to consider about the ecology of spirits and the fact that we do live in their communities. And so yeah, I think you did a really good job of outlining an introduction to angels, and I'm sure we will have future episodes on more technical stuff. I know there is a drawing spirits into crystals episode on the horizon. I also know that there is a D episode, not necessarily a Nokian, but like just D himself episode.
Yeah.
And I mean, I know you're interested in that one. And when we talk about episodes in the future, this is not promising it will be soon. Sometimes we talk about it and it's the next one. Sometimes we talk about it and it's in 15. Give us a second. We've not skipped an upload yet, and we have had bonus episodes. So keep with us for a second. But yeah, this was lovely, and I really appreciate your I think, for ritual protocols, maybe one thing to just kind of end off on is always be polite. Don't be rude. Don't fight. Don't get combative. This is Salt, you've described this to me as like being the best employee of a boss. Just kind of like, which is really funny because like when Key and I do a political episode, we're like so like rah, fight all that shit. But like in front of certain spirits, you just gotta lips closed, back straight, right?
Oh
Um,
yeah, pick your
yeah.
battles. And
Pick your battles,
don't
yeah.
pick them with angels.
Yeah, exactly.
We saw how that went for one spirit.
Exactly. No thwarting angels thwarting you. And yeah, candle, incense, prayers, ritual cleanliness, fasting for a few days, call them in a glass, stone, a crystal. I like drawing spirits into crystals. Key and I have had the really cool experience doing an experiment to call a good spirit into a glass from the Faustian texts, which you can read about with Cunning Command. In that case, it was a glass of water that happened to have the fourth pentacle of the sun inside of it, suspended, because it does allow you to see spirits more clearly. And then, fervent prayer. If they don't come, keep praying. And remember that angels are subject to their own beings, so you can always call upon the names of God above them, which is really easy to do if you like to do your planetary stuff. There's always like a name associated. And you can also compel them by those who serve them, right? The intelligence and spirit, for example, if you're calling on the planetary archangel.
Yeah, there's so much tech, so much room for experimentation, so many different methods. Like, they're across the board, present in nearly every single grimoire. Give it a go, make sure to try it out. And I do want to ask one thing, and it's really important. And please, listeners as well, I want you to answer this question as well. Just let us know in the comments or in the Discord. But this question is really what this entire episode has been leading up to. It's what this entire episode hinges on. And I'm just going to ask it straight out. What emoji is your guys' guardian angel's favorite? Okay, you can't silence your way out of this one. I want an answer, my son.
I think my guardian angel's favorite emoji is maybe the bucket of popcorn.
Oh yeah, of course. My guardian angel's favorite emoji is the mobile_phone_off to remind so that I stop scrolling in my Instagram reels and have my brain polluted with horse shit memes that prevent me from speaking like a coherent individual. Like my intelligence just shrinks and I'm unable to actually speak with you guys because I'm too busy having a giggle.
Too real. Real.
Exactly. And just to shamelessly plug it, the true answer is the emoji chomp from our Patreon Discord server. So if you want to know what I'm talking about, join the Patreon and join the Discord.
We do have an angel emoji. It's the fear not one, where it has like multiple eyes and hands and stuff. But biblically accurate emoji.
Oh yeah. This
Mm-hmm.
is the real Patreon perk, folks. This is the real Patreon perk. Find out.
Yeah, because if you have a Nitro, you could just use all our lit emojis, like our Saint Cyprian emoji, our Laugan Ma one, Duolingo owl with a gun, Sava Savanovich, Chicago rat hole. We got a lot of good ones.
That we do.
Well, amazing, boys. Thank you so much, Salt. It's been so good to have you back and so good to have you for a full episode.
Yeah, it's been good to be back. Apologies to the listeners. I've been very hectic in my personal life in terms of workload. So we're going to see some new preemptive uploads for the Almanac as well. We're going to be moving a month ahead. So this month we're going to get 2 issues coming out, both January and February. So both February and the next month as well. So look forward to that.
Fantastic. And are we going to be so lucky as to have a Salt patented Akashic record?
We are, and as normal, it is not just from, it's not a generic band, it is an OST from the Don Juan Renegade Immortal shit. Rebuilding My Body, God's Coming by Jiang Shenxiao. And I just like it. I like it, all right? That's all I can say.
I love when you come with the freaking god tier Shansha picks. This came up in our last, I think, wasn't it in our Q&A where we were talking about literature? And you like quote beautiful poetry, and then I'm like, oh, and also I like Shansha, like novels. Junior, you dare? Yes.
Listen. If you've ever read Paradise Lost, it can be summed up by one quote, which is continuously and perpetually present across Yanja, which is toad lusting after swan meat.
Toad lusting after swan meat. Ladies, remember, he toad, you swan. Hey, what bullshit is this? I'm looking at our document. What angel beats?
Oh man. Might as well, right?
Yeah.
The Alchemy by Girl Demo from the anime Angel Beats, notably, because it's a
Okay,
good song
the
and
the
it's good
late
fun.
the late 2000 and early 2010s are really coming into force this episode. Jesus.
Literally, yeah.
Exactly, it had to correspond to the discourse of the time, right?
Mhm,
Absolutely, absolutely. It's on flavor.
mhm. Well, mine is John D by Ghosty Mane. So I feel like we all just went completely crazy for the quadric arts this time. I'll
Oh
wake
my
up in the
god, yeah.
morning feeling like I'm John D.
Got my black magic book and got my circle around me.
I
Anyway.
wake up in the morning. You've actually seen Ghosty Mane in person.
Oh my god, yeah. Got a concussion at that show. It was the best I've ever been to.
Yeah. This is why I keep asking you boys, how do you manage to go moshing? I use my talismans to get out of moshing, to like get the fuck out of there. You guys are jumping into that shit. Key is out there like actively trying to get into the center of the mosh so he can fight people.
And it's good.
It is.
Sometimes you just gotta throw yourself into the pit and then melee your way out, you know?
Throw me to the wolves. Something, something.
Throw me to the wolves and I'll come back with more wolves.
Yeah.
A very
And
confusing elevative process, much like pseudo Dionysus.
yeah. Throw Key to the wolves and the wolves will be pregnant. There's, there's two wolves inside of him and they're both gay and they're kissing. Mwah, 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 mwah.
Exactly.
Nasty.
Oh, amazing. Honestly, I think the best pick this time around goes to Salt though, because rebuilding my body, God's coming, is such a god tier pick for an Angel episode on so many levels.
So good.
They're like the angels are Gundaming, you know?
Mhm. The Ophanim are adding additional wheels with additional eyes
Yeah,
to
exactly.
whatever they're doing.
I mean, I'm pretty sure the context for that song was specifically the main character literally rebuilding his body after having spent half the show possessing some other guy's body after he was killed. So
Mhm.
it's a fun one.
Amazing. And not a surprise to anybody who's been listening very carefully, and by carefully, I mean somewhat partially attentively. The license to depart is from Drawing Spirits into Crystals by, allegedly, Johannes Trithemius, but more likely, Francis Barrett. And, and Key, it's time to put that fitted sheet over that laundry basket. You're up.
Oh man. Thank you all for joining us for this wild ride of an episode. And I bid you, thou great and mightiest spirit, inasmuch as thou camest in peace, and in the name of the ever blessed and righteous Trinity, so in this name thou mayest depart and return to us when we call thee, in his name, to whom every knee doth bow down. Fare thee well, good angel, peace be between us, through our blessed Lord Jesus Christ. Amen.
I'm a beast, I'm a killer, I'm the young Crowley.